that the common intellect to this, our current latex circumstance, is confounded and retreats into fantasy. That more than their any notion or understanding of the origin stories and the grand sagas of our precious prefects, these haughty concepts, civil liberty, or more than a name or two, let alone the founding philosophies of the founding figures, and the fundamental tenets of what federation they founded, the average American early to late 20-something is more knowledgeable to the most minute memories of propaganda personas, fantastic figures of comic book fiction, superheroes, brave idol dressed in holy hue, which have become the new champions of modern American history, but because that the angel's place, that city of angelic face, that paper script and star equipped, than anyone would, that looking good, that idle wild Hollywood. It is perfected hypnosis at its opiate pulpit, and by its form unto false worship, its tarot card witchcraft cauldron on film. And moviegoers leave the theater, and in some way the world seems safer, even after they exit, because there's someone out there fighting for us on film. Because we won. Didn't you hear the music? Because our holy superhero found a way, and the trumpets gave sound to our triumph before the credits rolled. Because our super holy hero won for us the day. Watch out, though. He beat those bad guys yesterday, before they made their getaway, and made again my spending cash their prey. Yet for now, until the next, may this sequel suffice. Its storyline device, they wrapped up this one nice, well worth the ticket price. Until their next encounter, though, which, whenever light may show, of course I'll go. Another installment caught, with special effects and peril fraught. Its labor wrought, our battle fought, and all for just a ticket bought. For now, though, and until then, thank you, Lord Cinema, that under heaven the righteous reign, fictionally. Let justice finally flourish free, fantastically. Peace, if temporarily, 'cause Batman watches out for me. Ugh. And good Lord, lobotomize me if you won't else help. Make dim my light and lighten this endless trial, stifle this ceaseless thought and make me more my common man. Fuckhead finally flips his sign and I roll through. Once I pass the long line of cars that's accumulated on the other side of the road crew's construction, I put fire to the end of my peace pipe glass piece and draw combustion peacefully through it, holding its peace within me until my driving eyes are dizzied. Another flick of my bick, another full of smoky pull, and I'm drawn and sink still down into this deep ponder. The earlier incident at the plasma place hardly happened. Who cares? But for this broader topic that I began there to think about. And thinking takes time, and I have much to consider. It's not like I'm unraveling these things all today, or as something new which suddenly I ponder through. While, admittedly, if not for the distinctly demographic dynamic that culminated the disappointing episode at the plasma place, and along with and for the naturally reflective inclination, symbolized by dwindling candles atop a cake, and inspired with somber age today, I probably would not, thusly, or pursuant unto such themes, be presently preoccupied. And while it's also not the case that I frequently fixate myself, legitimizing the far more often fraudulent and false formulate of superficial racial hate, yet it's certainly been, and much more often of late, a more common compulsion to my contemplate. So, wherefore, many of these points are fresh in my mind. A trend has been observed, details discerned, variables isolated, and data drawn. My recall of the evidence, therefore, is quicker retrieved than it is related, or presented for coherent perusal, and duration is all in the delineation. Yet here we are caught up with me, and we've arrived that I've passed the road crew, smoked now twice in short span. I'm settled in to speculate more this surreal circumstance, I remember that here I am again, stuck in the midst of Venn diagram, like my many ambiguous examples. As though ready to begin composing synopsis of pertinent methodology, my recent recollections as yet still to follow, and to start reporting on my findings, but here I am again halted at deciphering, and unable to decide if my hypothesis, if any hypothesis, ascends yet prevalent, which toward a more proper science to this something Socratic experiment, having stated what was, or is as yet anticipated, I might frame for the personal reference of my own convenient easel toward any truer direction in what dissertation should follow. But as yet I'm let no clearer inclination between heads and tails, beyond that logic should compute toward the cloth. That its grand presumption, however, that my presumption to myself personally, that it needs no more confirmation, that great and wondrous and daunting things occur close and correspond directly to me, of only that I am certain. Am I certain, against whom I ride though, and in this Latin liturgy adjust my joust and tilt my lowered lance, which foe or the other I oppose, but both more likely together I suppose, that remains to be seen, for either it's the Catholic Church to all conspire, and I'm the hearth, and I wear the pontiff's fire, his contrary clergy club of father-fucking fogs, his priesthood of predators, his secret nation of sodomites, or else I contend with entire state secular South America, all Western Latinate, whole Espanol localized within Route 88's toll. Either way, it bodes eruption. Before 3 or 4 months ago, though, it was all paramilitary to me and visage void of racial pigment. That's how I know that racial resentment, residual anthropology of profound spanning factor, primordial, back to our pre-nomadic primate, progressed all through and unto this very day, is but the vague, yet primarily instinctual preference for one's own people primarily, and breeding proclivity towards partners of similar visual aspect, which disposition is mere mechanic, that evolution harnessed the unique advantages which environment influences to adapt, that lion, lynx, and leopard are all yet racial in their species, and each but breeds a feline. Yet among man's more robust intellect, and I say not higher, but more robust, for that the vast majority of mankind is only more voracious in beastly appetite than beasts, and so hardly more elevated his motivations, yet definitively deficient compared to most animals in terms of pro-social emotional capacity, that within man's more robust intellect, his more developed id-driven impulse, racial animosity, which, if all's well in one's world, and so long as the other guy isn't depleting the proximity of potential mates, or flaunting his stuff, or generally disrupting the peace, or trying to fuck your daughter, is among most, I imagine, mostly non-existent, or else mostly insincere, maintained among men to fit in with his own, and distinguish dissenters. Dissenter, that is, being anyone who although similar visually, yet requires real reasons to hate another, or worse, who fails to be naturally hateful, which are to be shunned by the group. Racial animosity, though, these past few months have made me know, is not most crucially even racial. That is, sociologic, political, anthropologic, biologic, and any other descriptive discipline that lends lens regarding and contributes component to the complicated schematic, racism, but instead is fundamentally economic, and all the other factors sediment atop that initial tension. And how always accordant to his denigrate demographic humanity to apply but misappropriate the base practices of his so prevalent zoology, always at present a beast. And his finance, his now global jungle, has evolved an always close survivalist to the nature of its economic environment, like competing carnivore packs, distinct species of wild canine, fighting to protect its territory of established taxonomic dominance, and for whatever might suffice, within a forest forever in famine, and stingy to the unfamiliar feature of rival breed. For as much as I have been approached by dissemblers in diverse variety, and these, Ezekiel's wheels, these cycling bands that have been circulated for years now upon me, and which at times have prevented my any peace, they've been comprised of skin tone and wide spectrum, yet never, prior to this prolonged recent poverty, have I ever before felt, let alone felt compelled to ventilate, such animosity on my own. Nope, no ma'am, or sir. It wasn't until being unjustly fired from the inn, collectively shunned from hire by the dozens of other hotels within the given suburbia thereafter, almost all of which are owned by India Hindi, and becoming soon then and eventually desperately unemployed and all but destitute again, and even then only after many weeks of frustration, and once it was become blatant that I was forbidden. Hotel maintenance man was the last foreseeable bastion of better employment than the minimum wage of retail, and which also wouldn't subject me to the masculine entirety of the trades, as I'm not homophobic but fragilophobic, nor arrogantly dismissive but misandristic, insomuch that I'm a BBB discredited, worthless, lousy felon, and other than an enthusiastic work ethic and a cheery disposition, I bring little to the table, somehow even less in terms of relevant experience, across all sectors too, really, except teaching, in which I would prove stellar and watch utopia slowly usher in, but like I said, worthless felon. But and like I also said, I spoke too much on behalf of the inn's labor force of beleaguered and abused single mother immigrants, in my own complaints unto the inn's HR hybrid team, Ron and Trixie, about Landra, the migrant swine mercenary, and daughter of her father, the described cockfighter, and hateful lump who emigrated here to grace Oswego with her cave troll type, which awful kind are hired around here of Hindus to crack the whip on their own dispossessed people for an extra $2 an hour. Landra routinely reduced to tears the inn's Hispanic help, Landra's fellow immigrant women, and never miss an opportunity to make their hard lives even harder, with severe scrutiny and censure for the smallest of oversights in their maid duties, and for tawdry infractions would underlay management's decisions, report at their quarterly efficiency report, certainly, to deny desperate mothers extra hours and raises long overdue. I became rather outspoken about Landra's bullshit and management's complicit enabling of it, so naturally upon termination, I was also blacklisted from the whole local haberdashery sector, lest the rest of these arms of Ganesh within range be tempted by a diligent college graduate and be confronted of their similar greedy breed. My excluded status became perfectly apparent over the month that followed. I exhausted a list that was scores high, of establishments within 40 miles, and a dozen times I was all but hired, after an impromptu walk-in interview, until Auntie Gupta or Uncle Patel ran my name through secret anti-commie database.gov/loudmouths, and then I couldn't get a call back or a manager on the phone. Before long I was filling out applications, and an hour and a half at a time, for the bottom dollar of franchise retail. But that's also how I know that this hidden hand against me shakes hands with hombres, and that the schemes against me are spoken bilingual, because that once the branding upon me of my blacklisting had become abundantly clear, Hindu-owned hotel after Hindu-owned hotel, that is, franchise hotel after franchise hotel, their futile efforts, too often following similar pattern, mutual optimism at my prospective employment. When first I walk in, fill out the application, shake the hand of the responsible party, and chat with the head manager on shift. frequent interviews on the spot, then, if not tentatively offered a position pending background check, then promises of follow-up interviews to be established shortly thereafter, then not denial, but avoidance of me whatsoever for many days hence. Until whensoever we should reestablish contact, unto the point now moot, and the position also now no longer vacant. Then 3 minimum wage retail interviews and their 3 subsequent denials later, one of which, to be fair, was me among my most awkward, in an awkward and ugly life. So I'll spare me as well and say that merely that one was my fault. The other 2, though, having been conducted by these same unfuckable Chihuahua pugs who weren't about to subject themselves to having to look at me, platonically, and still be civil over an 8-hour shift. And finally, one mid-something August day, after receiving the 3rd rejection email, thanking but refusing me, and after then, some pudgy, gangsta-clad Chico, some homely hombre grande, was mildly but blatantly inconsiderate to me in the parking lot, and suddenly I'm frothing at the mouth with racial manifesto to myself in my car by myself, and by my breath spewing forth verbal magma that should have only been overheard by the radio and gossiped by the glass of the rearview mirror. Then many hours later, on the night of that very day, during which very afternoon in my car alone, I first voiced venom against Vatos vehemently, in the late evening of that same night, of that same very day, in the parking lot of a McDonald's that was deserted for the near hour of the trough's nightly closing, some angry queer hombres were awaiting my walking arrival, and then ominously tailed me after my walking departure.